Yeah, you read that right. How my insecurities cost me the teaching dream that I always wanted. So, my name is Dr. Amy Hager, and I'm an education reform strategist. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how my insecurities robbed me of meaningful relationships, awesome opportunities, and just general happiness in the teaching career that I always wanted. Now, you might think, Amy, but like you have your doctorate and you opened a six-figure business and built it from the ground up and like you are your own boss, and yes, all of that is great. But the fact is that at one point I was super happy being a teacher. If I was your teacher between the years of 2006 and like 2012, you caught me in my prime. I absolutely loved it. I was coming to work every day. I was dressing up. Like I was excited about dresses and just looking the part. I loved it. I was at every game, every dance. I was at talent shows. You name it, I was there for the kids and I absolutely loved it. I enjoyed the challenge of getting kids to do well on their standardized tests at the end of the year. Like, it was my favorite. But it wasn't just like one thing that caused me to want to leave. It was my insecurities. It was things that I was doing. I now see back that I was doing it back when I was student teaching. One thing, like my physical health was not a priority. I would come to work sick. It was, especially when I was teaching special education and I was in a comprehensive classroom. And those of you that have been in there, you know, it's just easier to come to work sometimes. Like I would have to have 8 preps and copies and I couldn't do anything on the computer. And I'll just go to work. Like, but I wasn't eating breakfast. I wasn't packing a lunch. So at the end of the day, I'm starving and I just stop and get something because I'm so hungry. I had about a half-hour drive to get home and I couldn't wait, or I would just hurry up and get something because I didn't want to cook. Or like that's just what I would do. If I had a bad day, I would reward myself. If I was bored, I would order food. If I was overwhelmed, I would just think, okay, I'll just order some food and then I can just take a beat and just kind of rest for a minute and then kind of like food became my drinking buddy. And I don't care what anybody says about marijuana, food is the gateway drug because when food doesn't feel good anymore, you move on to something else. And that's kind of the boat I was in. I was very unhealthy with my sleeping patterns, my eating habits. I either would sleep way too much or I'd be up 3-4 o'clock in the morning, like typing up lesson plans in a very manic, behavior. In regards to my security, I always kept a second job, at least one. I was either going to school or I was working 2 or 3 other jobs in addition to teaching school. Like one paycheck just wasn't enough. I was so afraid of not having enough money. I was always afraid of like having to ask somebody for, help. I didn't want to have to ask my mom or, my dad or whoever, like for some cash. So I was constantly working. I was in a state of fear. I had a really bad relationship with money. And all of that kind of compiled into poor relationships with my coworkers. Like if I worked with you between the years of probably, let's say 2000, maybe 12, maybe 9, maybe 2009, I don't know, 10, something like that, until 2018, 19, you might be entitled to a structured settlement. I don't know. Like, I know that I was not the nicest person to work with. And to those of you, I am greatly sorry. Just know that it was coming from a place of hurt. Before anybody even hurt me, I was accepting rejection before it was even put on the table. And that's just something that I have had to deal with. It was another thing that got in my way, which then kept me from really having any kind of self-esteem boost because here, I know I was doing well as a teacher. Like I had great relationships with the kids, with the parents. My special ed kids did awesome. I was like knocking it out of the park with standardized tests, yet nobody was asking me for help. Nobody was asking me for mentorship. I was getting passed over for positions that I was highly qualified for, and they were giving them to people who didn't even have the credentials and they were giving it to people who didn't even have the credentials. So it kind of left me in a place of like, well, what's the problem? But I understand. I wouldn't want to work with me either. Like I was not the nicest. And why would I expect leadership to jump through my stubbornness, push through my bad attitude, right? And my I don't need anybody's help. Like all of that. Why would they go through all that effort to do all that to then say, hey, Amy, do you want to join our team? Hey, Amy, can we use you? Like I probably gave this vibe of like, don't talk to me. Like, I'm not going to help you. So of course I really struggled to find the most fulfillment out of my career because I really struggled to find the best version of my career because I had gotten in my way the whole time. Right? So, yes, I went off and started another business only because by the grace of God, he saw that he had a path for me. And I, at one point, thought I was going to be one of these teachers that was going to teach for 30 years. I thought that I'd be one that would retire and then kind of come back part time to be a long term sub when people were out on maternity leave. I thought that was going to be me. And then it wasn't. And so I had to grieve the loss of that. I had to come to terms that I was going to part ways with my teaching career. And it wasn't right away. It took several years, and I just got more miserable and more miserable and more miserable until I finally, I had to do something else. And so I went on and started a business. And again, by the grace of God, he had a goal for me, but because I got in my way, I was not able to have those blessings in my teaching career. But because he's good, he allowed me another way to be successful. So yes, I am the CEO of a 6-figure company. Yes, I am my own boss. Yes, I was able to build a company from the ground up, but really, I love teaching. There are a lot of parts that I do miss, but because of my stubbornness and because of my stank attitude and because I didn't think I needed anybody and all of that cost me this dream job that I wanted. I quit my teaching job, okay? And my reasons behind it were really because I was unhappy. I was a reason why I did not have good relationships with my coworkers. I was a reason why I was getting passed over for jobs. I was a reason why I was not being asked to participate in leadership opportunities, okay? Now, I really had to sit back and think, where did all that bitterness come from? Where did all that anger, where did that nasty attitude, where did it come from? Because my mom's really sweet. I wasn't raised to be like this. So what happened, right? So I had to really do a lot of mindset work. So there was this separate little part of me, okay, a little inner self that I really didn't pay any attention to. And this whole time since I've been little, she has been taking copious notes on who has wronged me, situations where I got my heart broken or my feelings hurt or made to feel embarrassed or inadequate or whatever, okay? And she was keeping notes. And all that time, she had been putting interventions in place, if you will, to keep me from getting hurt again. Okay, but these interventions were things like stubbornness. I don't need anybody's help. I can do it on my own. I don't want anybody to rub it in my face later. I don't want to have to be vulnerable and ask for help. I don't want to be vulnerable and hear somebody else's feedback. I got it. Okay. The other thing was that nasty attitude. I kept an attitude all the time. And maybe that's why the kids kind of got along with me, because I had an attitude like a teenager. So maybe they could relate to that a little bit more, but that is not something to brag about. Oh, and sprinkle in a little bit of drive, okay? So I act like I don't need anybody. I'm going to do it myself. I've got a really nasty attitude, so I alienated myself from any kind of coworker networking. It kept me from having any kind of good relationships. Nobody was going to want to work with me. I was mean. But then I had the drive of, I'm going to prove you wrong. And really, that's why I opened my center. Now I realize it wasn't so much my love of young children, because I'd always taught middle and high school. It was because I knew it was a good idea. There was nothing else like it. And I knew it was a guaranteed success. I knew that this was going to work because there's nothing like it in our area. Okay, so I started a business just to say, hey, I don't need you guys. I don't need you. I'm going to go out and do it myself. And that is the equivalent of rebelling against your parents and dating the bad guy and then coming home with a baby. So as much as I love my childcare center, I opened the center because I was being a brat. I was just fine, I'll show you. I don't need your job. I don't need your promotions. I don't need that. I'm just going to go start my own company. And see, I don't need you. And that is not a good way to start a chapter in your life. You think about relationships. In order for you to move on and have a healthy relationship, you have to address the stuff that you've already talked about. You have to address all the things in your old relationship that you did or red flags you missed or vibes you kind of put out to attract the wrong person, or really that it just didn't work. Like if I don't address that old stuff, I'm going to bring it with me into this venture. I don't want to lead from a place of hurt and bitterness and stank attitude. I want to be positive. I want positive people around me. I want just awesome people that are going to come into my space and really help me take my company to the next level and really be able to be a resource. Because whether I started it because I like kids or not, the fact is we have a lot of families that need us, that don't have anybody else to watch their kids at night but us. So I'm very grateful that I went down this journey, but I need to address all the stuff that I was doing before. So back to this little self, this little like inner self that I didn't know about. Some people refer to it as your shadow self, you know, that thing that's kind of behind you, that's always connected and you don't even really pay any attention to it. And my shadow self was trying to save me. My shadow self was doing her due diligence to keep me safe. And even though her intentions were good, it probably cost me more than I got out of my teaching career anyway. I kind of have this like little baddie as my shadow self because she's the one that ultimately got me to open this center. Like this was my ultimate protection. She has made it so I don't have a boss. I don't really answer to anybody. Like she made it so I was professionally and financially free, which is kind of amazing. And now that I know how strong she is and what she's actually capable of, I'm working on reprogramming her to make sure that we have good supports in place, not ones that are going to reject people in my life, that are going to reject help and resources. That is probably my biggest hiccup as an entrepreneur. I wanted to do it myself. I didn't want to ask for any help. I didn't want to be vulnerable. And that cost me money. It cost me time. So having said all that, if your wheels are spinning and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm doing that in my career. I'm doing that in my life. Oh my gosh, I don't like, I want to invite you to just one more video. If you click the link below, you're going to get access to this next video. And it is called Getting Your Shadow Self to Work for You. I didn't even know she was there. And she did all this stuff for me. So I want to invite you to this. Please grab it. This is probably some of the most important work I've ever done, better than any lesson plans or test prep or even opening my childcare center. This is super important. This is game changing and I want you to grab it. Let's get started. All right, talk to you soon.